I had an interesting story when I started my coaching business, and I thought I was going to go out there and I was going to crush it, right? I mean, we all do when we're starting a business or a new endeavor, and I did not. And it wasn't that I actually couldn't do the work; it's that I couldn't get clients. And so, about I'm trying to figure about a year. About 6 months in, I hired my own coach. That would prove to be incredibly transformative. You network a lot. You host networking events. How many times do you ask people how they are? And what's the de facto response?
Good. Great.
Yeah, like what does that even mean? Yeah, or you have those moments, right? And I mean, we've all been guilty of this, I'm sure, where you ask somebody how they're doing and they're like, great. Oh, you should tell your face that. Right? There's this great story from Good to Great, Jim Collins' book. What's called the Stockdale Paradox. And there was this guy from the Navy, his name was Jim Stockdale, and he was shot down in North Vietnam. And he ended up in this prison camp called the Hotel Hanoi, which was one of the most vicious in that war. He was there for 8 years, and he ended up getting released at the end of the war. He made it the whole time.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Kamil Sarji, the host of Just 2 Minutes, and today I have Josh here. Josh, you want to tell us about yourself?
Hi, everyone. Josh Vanada. I do leadership business coaching as well as strategic advising. And so I think the easiest way, I get asked a lot about what it is that I do, is actually just to share a story. About 1 year ago, one of my clients hired me and said, hey, look, I'm working 80 hours a week, and I actually want to, I want to work less. I just got married, and my wife's really not up for this. And so he ended up hiring me. And 3 months into it, he sent me an email saying, hey, I'm thinking about expanding the business. And so now he's actually expanded his business out into Iowa, and he's working 40 hours a week versus working 80 hours a week. And the way we did that together was to figure out what it was that he really wanted, and then to create an intentional plan around that and work together to achieve it.
Nice. That's awesome. And you're here so we can talk about business and real estate and people not knowing, because you can run a really good real estate team, but running the business is completely different mindset, different things. So yeah, I'm really excited to have you here. But first we have our Just 2 Minutes. So my timer here. Are you ready for?
Let's go.
Okay. And go. So if it's green, mushy, does that mean it's guacamole?
I think it's likely. If it's green and it's mushy, it's probably guacamole, yeah.
Okay. What, if you look at like all the animals, I'm looking for not the fastest runner, but the longest runner out of these two. An elephant and a hippo.
I'm going to say it's probably going to be an elephant.
For the long run, right?
For the long run,
okay.
Yeah. Because they're used to being outside of the water. The hippos have to cool off.
Okay. So if someone says it's true, how do you know that they're really saying that it's really is true and they're not trying to get your social security number?
Oh, so like if somebody's calling me, I would say trust but verify. I think that's a great Ronald Reagan maxim. So figure out how we could verify that what they're actually saying is really true.
Okay. How would you verify someone?
I think I would probably ask where they were. I would ask to either call them back or do some more research or something like that.
Okay. So if an AI Jesus was talking to you and telling you, hey, everybody should be nice and not fight, would you believe that?
I think if AI Jesus was talking to me, he would probably say that my grace is sufficient, my mercy is inexhaustible, and my love is unconditional.
Okay, awesome. I know they say when it rains, it pours, but when it snows, it...
Presumably, if you carry the analogy out, it blizzards.
It would blizzard. Huh? Nice. What do you think?
It's funny. I mean, that's not type of stuff that I typically do, but it's fun. I mean, it's creative. It's like helps us to not take ourselves so seriously.
Yeah,
which I think is important.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. So, really excited to talk about real estate business. But I mean, as far as what you do and how you've changed people's way of thinking and even running their business is pretty impressive. What do you think people don't notice when they're going into a business?
Oh man, that's a great question. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of things and it varies. I think what I would say is kind of a general or an umbrella statement would be we don't know what we don't know. And there's this great story from Good to Great, Jim Collins' book. It's called the Stockdale Paradox. And there was this guy from the Navy. His name was Jim Stockdale, and he was shot down in North Vietnam. And he ended up in this prison camp called the Hotel Hanoi, which was one of the most vicious in that war. He was there for 8 years, and he ended up getting released at the end of the war. He made it the whole time. And so Collins had an opportunity to interview him, and he said, "Hey, what what happened there? Like, tell me, what was it like in there? How, like, a lot of people died. Who died?" And he said, "Well, actually, it's interesting you ask that." He said, "The people who died first were the optimists, and they died of a broken heart. The people who died second, pessimists. Okay, well, what about the survivors?" He said, "We never lost hope in the fact that in the end we could get out with the fact that we were currently going through hell." And I think there's a real sobriety and a willingness to confront what's going on and not losing hope in the entrepreneurial journey. And I think when we lean too heavily in one of those two areas, that's actually when we get ourselves in trouble. It can be that we will succeed, and it's extraordinarily difficult. And I think having that type of sobriety when we're going into business is super important.
Wow. It's a crazy story.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's a really amazing story.
Because I mean, like, being in that, I don't know, how would you feel? Like, I would probably be optimistic and probably die. But
Yeah, I've thought about that often. I mean, it was when I read that, I was like, I probably would have been one of the first ones to die, because the people were thinking, okay, I'm gonna, we're recording this in July. I'll be out by the end of the summer, and the end of summer comes and you're not released, and then Thanksgiving, and then Christmas, and they eventually. I think the quote is, they eventually died of a broken heart. So I think that's probably, I relate to that. I probably would be an incredible optimist.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. The determination just to, wow, that's goodness. So in business, surviving is the way to go.
I think I actually think it's about perseverance. And I think what's underneath that is a sobriety about, like, how are things actually going? I mean, you network a lot. You host networking events. How many times do you ask people how they are? And what's the de facto response?
Good. Great.
Yeah. Like, what does that even mean? Yeah. Or you have those moments, right? And I mean, we've all been guilty of this, I'm sure, where you ask somebody how they're doing and they're like, "Great." "Oh, you should tell your face that." Right? And so I think I don't think it's, I think it's sobriety on the one hand, and just being willing to be super honest about where things are. And then figuring out that we still can achieve the goals we want, the outcomes that we want, but it's taking the continuous small steps to get towards that. We're not stuck, and we don't have to stay there, but we have to have a starting place and a destination. Those are both necessary for us to figure out how to make a successful journey. If I asked you how you were going to get to a particular location, you'd be like, "Well, where am I going?" And if I said, I'm not really sure, how could you ever get there?
Yeah.
And if you didn't know where you were starting from, same thing. It's like when your phone's in a GPS and, like, you're in an area, say you're up in Vermont or something, and it can't find actually where you are. Well, it can't give you directions.
Right.
And so I think there's actually a really cool metaphor there about figuring out what's going on, figuring out where you really want to be, and then charting a map to get there. And then it is about perseverance. I think perseverance has a lot to do with success in business, not in like a rah-rah type, but life's unfair. Business throws you curveballs you don't expect. How do you adapt to those and overcome those challenges?
I've thought about it this week. So someone starts a business, and I think entrepreneurs are different than regular people. Entrepreneurs are different thinkers, because the worker that goes to the 9 to 5, they rely on that, and that's how they make their money. But entrepreneur mindset is, I don't need to rely on someone else. I'm in charge of my future.
Exactly.
But to make it successful, I think, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably see this, they give up so quickly. Like it could be their first year they give up or second year. But I think anybody can run a business eventually and be successful eventually. Like if they had no other choice in life but to like, this is my calling, this is my business that I need to make successful. I have no other option. Then year one, they're failing. Year two, they're failing. Three, it could take them a longer time. But different people have that timeline, have different timelines of how long it'll take them to get successful. Is that right, you think?
Yeah, I think it's 100% accurate, and I think comparison. I can't remember who it was, but saying comparison is the thief of joy, and I think that that's actually true. I had an interesting story when I started my coaching business, and I thought I was going to go out there and I was going to crush it, right? I mean, we all do when we're starting a business or a new endeavor, and I did not crush it, and it wasn't that I actually couldn't do the work; it's that I couldn't get clients. And so about a year, about 6 months in, I hired my own coach, and that would prove to be incredibly transformative. It was amazing the blind spots that I had. She would have said, she said 6 months into our working together, it was so funny. She said, Josh, when I first met you, you're so needy. And we had such a laugh over it. And I still laugh about it to this day because she was right. She was 100% right. But I couldn't see that because I thought I was just going out and trying to do my best, right? And then about 8 months into working with each other, my business really took off. And now my practice is full, and it's really fun. But I think part of what happened in that year in August was I doubled down on it. And I said, this is all I'm going to focus on. I had some other things I was working on, some other like hobbies that were quasi-business interests. And I said, I'm just going to go all in on coaching. And that was a complete game changer. But I think you made a really key statement. I don't even know if you realize how powerful it was. The idea that when we put our focus directly onto one thing, and failure is not an option because it's the only thing we're doing, we're literally putting our chips all in. That's when things change. But what I see often is we're throttling our effort. And there's many different reasons for that. It could be I don't want to look silly by going all in. It could be that I'm afraid to go all in. And on the one hand, it could be the imposter syndrome, which I think is the more classic. But I actually think there's another kind of fear about going all in. It's we actually don't know what we could really achieve if we set ourselves to it. And I think that type of power can be intimidating, even when we see it inside of ourselves. And so I think sometimes it's easier to choose not to live into that. But I think, I do see that a lot. And I think everyone's journey is different. We shouldn't be living our lives on Instagram Reels and, seeing the best moments of everybody else's life. No one is, or I should say very few people are publishing the moments in which they're struggling. And it's actually in those places where we learn the most and we grow the most.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing like all these super successful speakers. They talk about the struggle to get to where they are. They talk about reaching the lowest of low.
Yeah.
Foreclosing on their home, repossessing of their cars. Like they hit the bottom. Too bad there's no way to accelerate that and say, like, all right, I'm going to start a business and get an injection. And you're like, oh my gosh, I got to make this work. And not worry about all the other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked sometimes with people who we call it catastrophizing. They're looking at like, it could be like, well, it's a little overcast today. Oh, we're going to get a tornado. It's like, well, actually, no, it's just a little overcast. We're not going to get a tornado. And so I think, you have that on the one hand, but I think it is helpful to look and say, what's the worst thing that happened? Well, this doesn't work and I'll go get another job. Like at the beginning. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I would do.
Exactly.
And so but I want to give it my all. I remember one time I was sitting with I was in the car business before this, and I was sitting with a dealer, and he was interviewing me for a job. The general sales manager had left. He wanted to hire me. And I said to him, okay, he said, everything's really good, Josh. He said, I think, I'd like to move forward. I said, great. I said, there's only one thing left. He said, what is it? I said, you have a horrible reputation for micromanaging people. I said, and here's the deal. I said, you want to be successful, obviously. I want to be successful, obviously. But the only way I'm going to be able to help this team is the way I know. And I said, so I'll take this job if you'll let me do it my way. And if it doesn't work, you can fire me and I'll take it like a man. And if it does work, you look like a genius. And so we had a great run together, and we still talk to each other today. And
Wow.
yeah, we had an awesome run together. It's not a bad story. A lot of people hear that story and they're like, oh my goodness, did you like even get the job? And it's like, no, he actually sat back in his chair and he smiled like this and he went like that. I mean, he was actually pleased that somebody who was gonna work for him would have the courage to speak into that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of at the core of it when we can go all in. And I also think there's another piece to that, which is I tell everybody that's ever worked for me, I want us to make as many non-life-threatening mistakes as we possibly can as soon as we can, because that means we can accelerate our rate of learning, and we can accelerate our rate of growth, and we can accelerate our success. It sounds like something that should be on a t-shirt or on a book or something like that, but it's actually stuff like that is simple. I mean, if we actually go out and learn, think about networking events in your industry.
Yeah.
You see maybe you're coaching an agent or something and they're really struggling and you're asking how many networking events they're going to, and they stopped going to network events 2 weeks ago because they weren't working, as opposed to figuring out why they weren't working, iterating, implementing new things, figuring out what worked, changing the rest, and continuously being in that iterative cycle where then all of a sudden they can start to see some success and get some referrals out of that.
Yeah. The crazy thing is, like, for these people who are starting their business, they have people who are in the industry, successful, giving them the blueprints. Like, you do this and you will be successful. And they still don't, or are kind of like hesitant to trust that.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Gallup Strengths Finder? Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of mine is something called individuation. And it basically means that I could see you as an agent and maybe I know some other agents. And while you guys are doing the same things, I could see your own unique strengths.
Oh, cool.
And I think one of the things that we often miss is we think, I have a headache, I'm going to take 2 aspirin and I'm going to be good. If you just follow this blueprint, you'll be successful. But there's actually another element in there, which is it's a softer element, which we can't measure. We could look at something and say, oh, did you go to these 10 networking events? Yeah. Did you make these Instagram posts? Yeah. But no one could do this show like you can. And so what we're not measuring and what we're not looking at is actually, how is that person showing up to follow that blueprint? Are they coming at it afraid? Are they timid? Are they standing in the corner at networking events? So it's not necessarily about the tactics. It's how we do the work. And I think what the most successful salespeople I've ever seen are the ones who do the work in the fullness of their own personality. It's not that it gets diminished. It actually gets enhanced and strengthened. And it looks as if they are fully alive, because in fact they are. And there's something inherently charismatic about us as human beings, particularly in sales, that invite us to those types of things. So I think their blueprints work great, but it's actually about the application of those blueprints that matters more than the blueprint itself.
So kind of like do the blueprint, but in your own way.
Yeah, or maybe the way I might do it would be saying, hey, this is what we have found has been really successful. I'm curious what in here looks the most natural to you, and how would you implement that?
Oh, cool.
And so what happens in that moment, the difference is between saying, here's the blueprint, do it your own way, and asking them the question, is now they're taking ownership over what's in that blueprint. That blueprint's becoming their own, and they're adopting it for themselves, and they're seeing themselves in it, as opposed to Kamil gave Josh a blueprint. Well, you know what, Kamil? The reason this blueprint doesn't work is because it's yours. Whereas if you asked me those questions that I just asked you, and I'm looking at that thing and I'm working on trying to implement it, it's actually my plan now. And so I'm going back to you saying, hey, Kamil, I'm working on the blueprint. Notice I didn't say your plan. I said the blueprint.
Yeah.
And this is what's working and this isn't. It's the difference between, when I was in the car business, at the end of my career as a GM, and customers would come up, and I always knew what kind of conversation I was in with the beginning phrase. It was either, I bought and they were about to tell me how happy they were, or they were going to, they said, you sold me. And they were about to tell me how frustrated they were.
Oh.
Do you see the difference in that?
Yeah.
In one, they took agency. It was their own good decision.
Yeah.
In the other one,
Blaming.
they're blaming somebody else because it didn't work. So I would say yes to the blueprint and load it with questions and how somebody could see themselves implementing it.
Wow, cool. Yeah, I'm actually putting together like a 20 question like questionnaire thing for an agent to fill out. And then from that, we're able to create a blueprint that works for them to do their business. Yeah. So, yeah. But I never thought of it that way. I've thought of it like, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, one of the things, I mean, I use the same methodology in business planning with every one of my clients. The methodology doesn't change. What's produced out of the methodology is really fascinating. It would be interesting as you're framing your 20 questions and thinking through that blueprinting process, if you had a process to actually that would guide them through it. So at the end, they were producing their own plan, but it was something that you just helped to guide them through as a kind of an operating system or something like that. That would be really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I started in real estate, I was like, oh, I gotta be professional. I gotta be like, you know,
right.
my reputation. Like, you know, I can't be silly. I can't be myself. I just gotta be like, hey, everybody, I'm Kamil Sarji.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. But then, like a couple of years ago, I was like, screw it. I'm just gonna be myself. What's the worst that can happen? People are not gonna want to work with me. That's fine, because I don't want to work with that person because they don't mesh with me. It's probably better.
100%. I had a really painful experience, which was catalytic for my business, probably about a year and a half ago or so. And I was on a nonprofit board, and the president and CEO of this organization was a good friend of mine. We had known each other for almost 15 years. And the organization wasn't doing very well. I was challenging some things that were going on. It was clear we were kind of drifting apart. Things came to a head while I was on a trip in Florida. And I came back and said, hey, I want to meet. And so I went into his office and just said, and I brought with me my letter of resignation. I said, look, our friendship's more important to me than anything else. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, this is stupid. And he looked across the table from me and he said, you want to know why? He goes, you want to know why people don't like you? Now, this is unsolicited advice. Yeah, that's how we began. He goes, it's because you're too much like a priest. People don't want somebody like that to coach them. And I was like, that's really interesting. In the moment, I was so stunned. I wish I actually asked him what he meant by that. Now, following, what is it, a year and a half, almost a year and a half later, one of the things my clients tell me now they love the most about me is just how human I am. You know, that I'll relate to them, meet them where they're at, and we just work on it together. And that I never stop seeking to draw the best out of them.
Yeah.
But I'm not doing it in a way that's like, I'm not like beating them. And so it's ironic.
Wow.
And I think dovetails really well with what you were just saying is I decided after that, I'm like, well, I'm certain there are people who actually want a more human approach. And so I'm just going to go out and find them. Right. And I did.
Right.
So I mean, amen to your story. Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Yeah. Cause I think in our industry, people that work with agents, they think they own them.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's a very interesting phenomenon.
Yeah. And because of that, they want you to do what they want.
Yeah.
Even put offers in the way they want and not kind of trusting you. But that's the most important part is the trust has to be there. And I think agents get too, I won't say desperate, but that they need the business, so they work with them and they get miserable, and versus working with someone who matches you. But when you meet someone, how do you tell them, like, we're not gonna mesh well, we're not gonna be good fit for each other, so maybe you should work with another agent?
I think kind of like that. I mean,
it's really tough to say that to someone.
Yeah, it is. But you know what? It's actually a kindness to them. And I think it has more integrity than working with somebody that you really don't like. I think one of the things that I've learned over the past year and a half or so, and I've ended up working with a lot of salespeople. Honestly, at the beginning, I resisted it, but I had trained salespeople now for almost 20 years, and I resisted it just because it was like I didn't think it was really my core client. But after like the third or fourth person who came and said, "Would you work with me?" That was a salesperson. I was like, "Okay, fine." One of the things that I've been working on teaching salespeople over the past year and a half specifically, but probably longer. I've had better language for it is creating agreements. And so when I meet somebody and they're like, "I'd like to work with you," my response is, "Hey, you know what? That's terrific. I'm really excited to learn more about what it is that you're working on, and let's make sure it's a good fit because you have to trust me, and I have to know that the thing you want to build, I can actually help you, and I have to make sure there's alignment too. And so let's just get together and we'll talk about it together." And we set it up right from the beginning that this actually isn't a fait accompli. Like they don't have the obligation to become a client, and I don't have the obligation to become their coach. And that's not rude. I think there's actually a good slowing down in that enrollment process there. And then I think the second thing is creating agreements. Because so often in sales, what happens is you have a client who has expectations that are based on absolutely nothing other than what they want. And you have a salesperson, a real estate agent, a car salesperson, payroll, whatever. And they're trying to keep their client happy, but there's no shared agreements between the two on how they'll communicate with each other, what the timeline is between communications, et cetera, et cetera. And so if we did more of the work up front, we're going to get more of the clients we want, and the process is going to be so much easier for everybody. It says right in my agreements to my clients that I will get back to them within 48 hours, which I will. Most of the time, I'm getting back to them within a few. But there are some instances where life gets busy, where I'll need the 2 full days to get back to them over email or something like that. And I think that's a real opportunity that salespeople miss to be leaders over the process. Clients become more demanding generally when they feel like the person is not leading the process. And I think the story the example you just brought up, I think is actually really a good one. And so that's kind of my response and my thinking around that is I think creating more agreements, having an enrollment process as opposed to just, being excited that somebody wants to work with you and just signing them up. Not all clients are good clients.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make the client bad, and that doesn't make the realtor or
Right.
salesperson bad. It just means it's not a good fit. And if we spent more time on fit, then we'd get more referrals because they're going to introduce more people like them. To me, it just seems like a more scientific way to engineer business.
Wow. You are human. Goodness. Like, seriously. I
Thank
love
you.
it. I love
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, you're awesome. Don't listen to that. I mean, you obviously didn't listen to him, but you, yeah. I love the way you think and think things through.
Thank you.
We as agents, if we're working with a buyer, we have to do a buyer agreement, and there's a lot of that in there. But yeah, I think you're right. Like setting the expectation in the beginning, or so they know what to expect from you. Yeah, good stuff.
I had a story with I was in a networking group one time or meeting, and I was listening to a story about this prospective buyer who fired their real estate agent because they were on an airplane and didn't respond to their message. I was aghast at that.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand it's a now business, but on the one hand, like why didn't we have some clarity around that? Why didn't somebody know that you're going to be traveling or whatever else? I mean, it was the whole thing was just like crazy. And then a particular agent was like, see, I'll always answer my phone, and I'm like, well, be careful what you create, because when you get a call at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night or at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and I'm always available, just understand you're always available.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Good point. Wow. It's got me thinking about, because we have a buyer presentation that we do with everybody. And I think adding that into that, setting the expectation of, if you try to reach me, you have to give me this much time to be able to respond. Don't expect me to respond back within 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes. Sometimes there's, I'm in showings, and so that's very important. And I think as agents, we all say that I'm always available.
Yeah.
Sitting at my phone, waiting for your text or waiting for your phone call to answer it.
Yeah. I mean, just on the human aspect, I mean, what an anxious way to live.
Yeah.
I mean, for everybody, it's like for someone who spends their working hours helping people be more intentional, there's nothing intentional about that. It's not even responsive. It's reactive. And it's tough to build something when we're always waiting for something to come in to tell us what we need to do. Like there's actually nothing offensive. There's nothing structural. There's nothing foundational about that at all. And so I think that it really causes us to live a more intentional life. And I actually think our unhappiness problem revolves around that as a society. I mean, you read all these world happiness reports and they're doing nosedives. And I think our lack of happiness actually has to do with our lack of intentionality. We're unintentionally, but actually willfully living the life that we think makes us look great. But if we got to 50 or 60 or whatever, and we're like, I wonder what did I do all those decades? Like, why was I doing that? I was making all these people happy, and I wasn't and that's where resentments build up. So I think some interesting stuff in there that I think happens inside of us. And I think when I listen to a salesperson tell me they're really pissed that this client is expecting them to be on all the time, and then they simultaneously say, I'm always available, I'm like, physician, heal thyself. I mean, what are you upset about? You literally said I'm always available, and they're holding you to exactly what you said, and you're upset.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's an important thing. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, after someone starts their business and whatever their timeline is to be successful or to be busy, I think there's, again, it's the having no other option but to move forward and succeed. Yeah. So once they become successful and start getting busy, then they get overwhelmed. And then they're like, should I tone this down a little bit? Should I not? And then they get into okay, how can I take on more and be able to, so they start trying to design that. But for people who get overwhelmed, do you see some tiptoeing backwards and sabotaging their business?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. I think burnout's a real problem with entrepreneurs, for sure. And I think I'll tell you an interesting story. So my boss had called me in January. I had just come back from teaching for the United States Chamber of Commerce at this engagement. And I loved it. And so I just wrote about this on my blog, but there's a Coca-Cola napkin that's framed in my office that says, I would rather take a temporary pay cut and do work that matters than continue on as a car dealer. This is really coming into focus. Because I wanted to be a coach for almost 10 years, excuse me.
Yeah.
So I told my boss I was leaving, and he said, "Hey, will you hang around?" And I said, "Yeah, I will." I mean, he goes, "We're going to look for your replacement, but would you kind of hang around and
consult?"
No, just help us bridge the gap.
Okay.
Right. And so I'm like, yeah, I think I will. I mean, they were great to me. And this is in the car business, this is a highly unconventional arrangement. You give your notice and immediately they're like, okay, we're on our way to pick up your keys. Actually, you know what? We're not even going to leave immediately. Get a cab.
Don't even.
Yeah. And get out and get out of there. But I think, I didn't realize coming out of that, how burnt out I was. And so for months, I actually just rested and I played golf and all that kind of stuff. And so I think related to that is, I wasn't doing anything that was really fulfilling to me. And so I think I do see some sort of decline. But once I got back into that, I think there was like, for me personally, was like, there was really clicking. The story I shared before the 2 minute segment earlier
Yeah.
with somebody who's like, hey, I just want you to come in and help me work less hours. And now his business is up, I don't know, 25% last year. He's on pace for another 25% increase this year. That's significant and it's material, but it's about getting really serious and sober minded about what it is that we want. And I think for me, I was spending a lot of time chasing things that I actually didn't really want. And so I think that's the real matter of it, is what does success actually look like? And it's a process. I think we need falling in love. The people who are really, really, really good. I mean, Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, they fell in love with the process and they just wanted to get better. I'm a golfer. We were talking about that before we started recording. And the more you worry about what you're going to shoot, the worse your score is. But if you just go out there and enjoy every shot, and when you hit a bad shot, you forget it and you move on to how you make the next shot the best, that actually seems to me to matter the most.
Yeah.
And what I've found is the moment when we can refocus ourselves, we come up with a real plan directionally that we want to go. I go into my first follow-up quarterly meeting with a client, and they're like, Josh, we're already like 3/4 of the way to our yearly goals. And it never fails. Because what happened was we got serious about what mattered, and we can actually do more in a shorter period of time than we can imagine when we give it our real focus. So I think that's actually what's going on in the midst of it, is there's a bunch of other voices going on, and we lose sight of, look, why did we actually get into this? What is it that we want out of it? For me, my sole motivation in starting my business was freedom. It was financial freedom. It's the freedom to set my own schedule. It's the freedom to be home and be the dad and the husband that I really want to be. And everything else, including my business, has to serve that purpose, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So I think in answering your question, yeah, I do see things that slide back, but it's very easily correctable. And this is a great time of year for people to be doing it. You think about how many people go away on vacation, right? And they come back and, maybe you're talking to a close friend or something, and they're like, oh, I had such a great time on vacation. I think I'm going to change jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times does it ever happen, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it's because we actually have the opportunity to slow down and think about what we really give a damn about. And that makes a really, really significant difference. And I would argue that we ought to live our lives at a pace similar to that, so we can be attentive to what's actually happening. But we're running from thing to thing to thing. I mean, I'm sure if you pulled out your calendar for the rest of the day, it's full. I'm going to go and meet with 3 or 4 of my clients after I'm done here. I was with an executive director of a nonprofit last week, and we were talking about calendaring, and she's a really, really bright woman. And she said, yeah, I run from meeting to meeting to meeting. And I was like, yeah, I said, I used to do that. And then I put in 15-minute breaks in between. And I was like, the 15-minute break, you just go stand outside and just take a deep breath and totally just get to chill out. And there's actually scientific research to support that it resets your nervous system.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting stuff. So I know you asked about backsliding in business, but I think all of this stuff really matters. I hired my own coach, and I said, what kind of coaching do you do? She said, I do mindset and transformational coaching. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm hiring her because she's grown a coaching business. Like, in my mind, I have said what I've realized now is that business bleeds into personal and personal bleeds into business. This idea that, you're going to drive your car up here to meet with me, and you get out of the car and whatever happened before this morning is like somehow forgotten and like segmented is crazy. It's loony. And so I actually think, if all of this stuff is like, well, yeah, but I want to grow my business, I would say that this actually is how you grow your business. Like, it's taking breaks. It's being intentional. It's really doing all the stuff we're kind of unpacking today. Otherwise, we're just going to get whatever the market gives us.
Yeah.
And isn't it convenient to just blame the market? And yet somehow, the good ones, they defy the market.
Yeah. 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 And I actually journaled when I was on vacation, saying, like, pretty much the gist of the whole vacation journaling was vacation and time off is important to grow my business.
Amen.
Because that's the only time I get to slow down. Even I'm working, but I'm, chill, and I'm like forecasting the future. I'm trying to figure out where do we want to be as a brokerage in the next 5 years, 10 years, and really planning that out. And I don't get to do that when I'm running the day-to-day operation.
Yeah, it's true. It's 100%. So every year we take 2 days away. My clients and I take 2 days away to work on doing something like that. And every quarter we come back to it for a half day, off-site, lunch, the whole 9 yards, just to slow down and take stock of what were the wins, what were the disappointments, where we need to be in the next 90 to get us where we want to go. And then monthly, you're working on just making sure that it's like a mini quarter. We've got to make sure that all 3 periods, actually, to use a hockey analogy, are aligned so that we get where we want to be in that quarter. And then when the 4 quarters add up, we have a good game. So yeah, I think that stuff's really, really, really important. I actually find that I communicate with my coach probably more when I'm on vacation than when I'm working.
Oh,
Just because of the amount of creativity that's going on. To your point, it's amazing the ideas we go to Lake George every August. So I think our 3rd or 4th, and I look forward to that vacation every year. I don't work, but inevitably work comes into my mind, and there's some incredible creativity and refreshment that happens as a result of that. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Ashley and I started, January? We went away to kind of like do planning. And kind of like, where do we want to take the business? How do we get there? Kind of planning out our future. It's pretty good. Good stuff.
I love that you guys are doing that. Good for you.
Yeah, it's cool that we're teamed up, and it just it changes things, because I'm, what I can do and what she can do now, it's like multiplied, because it's like, and it's broader spectrum from what I can do, but yeah, it's awesome. I love diversity, and agents here all like different experiences, different everything, and it's awesome to put everybody together and kind of like talk things through, come up with ideas together, and I love doing that. I think we covered everything, right? Anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No, I'm glad we finally got to do this. I know we talked about doing it before. I'm glad we're able to do this. Really appreciate the opportunity. I always enjoy talking about business and what it takes to be successful in business and in life.
Definitely, yeah, and you're, I respect and appreciate everything you do, and your knowledge and experience and everything makes you who you are today. An awesome coach.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
That's awesome.
So how do people find you?
Yeah, so they can, easiest place to find me is on our website. It's my first name, so Josh-Vanada, Vanada, just like Canada with a V.com. And we're on social and LinkedIn and all the rest of that stuff. Just look for me under my name. But the easiest place to get in touch with us and figure out what's going on is on our website. I put out a newsletter that goes out twice a month, which is always fun. I mean, my purpose behind my newsletter isn't to sell anything. It's literally to create conversation. And I always love when usually get 5 or so after every newsletter. People send me notes, and that's what I like. So if this conversation was cool and you wanted to just keep it going, sign up for my newsletter. They come out every 2 weeks, and we talk about something different that's going on, full of stories and practical stuff.
Yeah, I love it, because you are you're unique in that way. Not many people do that. Put a lot of thought into their blog. It's just, I don't know what percentage, but everybody's like, AI blog. Here you go.
Yeah, it's an interesting. AI is an interesting thing. I think it's a great tool for us, but I've been reading increasingly more studies on this, and I'm convinced of it. I actually think it's gonna, much like COVID did in having us increase our hunger for human interaction. I just think AI is gonna have us appreciate more people's humanity. Because AI actually can't solve all the problems, and I don't want AI writing stuff like that. Like, it has to me, it has to be personal, because I want it to be a conversation.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming by, and
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
My agents got a squad, we all in the zone. In-house help, so they ain't doing it alone. They focus on clients, negotiating win, while the back end's hand 'em, man, that's how we spin. I hand 'em business, watch 'em all climb.